Today I want to discuss some kind of interesting nuggets of wisdom we find in the early texts around what the Buddha said about running a small business. It's kind of the sort of thing you wouldn't expect him to talk about, but we do find some interesting information in the early suttas about this. I'm Doug Smith of the Online Dharma Institute. That's onlinedharma.org, where you can find courses about the Dharma of early Buddhism. If you're new to this channel and interested in living a wiser and a kinder and a calmer life, consider subscribing to this channel and click the bell down below if you want to receive notifications when I come out with these new videos. So, it's kind of weird. I mean, you would think that the Buddha would not discuss such a thing as small business, as how to run a small business. But there, as I say, there are all these interesting little nuggets of wisdom that we find in the early texts that both, in a certain sense, reveal the history of ancient India to us in a fascinating way. And so they're interesting on that ground alone, but also they involve a kind of a deeper wisdom that comes through to us even many centuries or millennia later. That is, there's something we can learn about what the Buddha has to say in running a business. Now, you might think that the Buddha wouldn't have anything to say about something as mundane as making money, which is what, after all, running a small business is partly about. But we have to keep in mind that the Buddha was not opposed to us making money. That is to say, righteous wealth righteously gained is one of the translations of one of the things the Buddha says. Righteous wealth righteously gained is perfectly fine. Indeed, the Buddha extols it in many respects. I have a whole course on this topic over at the Online Dharma Institute on work and pleasure and the lay life, which I will put a link to in the show notes down below in case you're interested in that course, where I discuss a whole bunch of different texts where the Buddha has lots of things to say. But in this case, let's just remember that for the monastic sangha to remain viable, the Buddha required there to be a lay community around to support them. And for that lay community to be able to support the monastic sangha, the lay community had to be successful in their business, frankly. They had to be successful people, at least to a certain degree, in order to have the disposable income, shall we say, to give food, give shelter, give clothing to the monastic sangha. So it was, and the Buddha understood that it was in his interest, and the interest in the development of the sangha, that there be this kind of active and successful lay community. And this is so even though success in the lay community is not, the Buddha did not believe that it was on a par with spiritual success, of course. It was a lesser kind of success, but it was success nonetheless. So my point is that we should not leave that out of our awareness. So in any event, there are a number of texts where the Buddha discusses such things. Today I'll discuss two that occur in the suttas side by side, where the Buddha essentially compares success as a monastic with success as a layperson with a small business. In the first sutta, the Buddha asks how it is that a small shopkeeper is able to acquire wealth. And he compares this to a monastic and asks how it is that a monastic is to acquire success in particular, you might say, jhana, in deep meditative absorption. So with the shopkeeper, what the Buddha says is, how does the shopkeeper make money? Well, the shopkeeper applies themselves to their work in the morning, at midday, and in the afternoon. Now there are a couple of different implications of this. I did a recent video on how deep jhana meditation is or should be. There's a certain amount of disagreement about that. I'll leave a link to that video down below in the notes. But one question is, how deep does it have to be in the sense of how much work does it take to get to jhana, to these deep states of meditative absorption? And this text gives us at least a route towards understanding one answer, which is that it takes quite a bit of work, that we have to be meditating in the morning, at midday, and in the afternoon. That is, basically the entire day. and probably over many days, of course, in order to achieve jhana properly. It's a long, long process. It's not the sort of thing that we should expect to achieve by doing a half an hour of meditation a day, or an hour even, in the same way that you wouldn't expect to successfully run a small business by working at it for a half an hour a day. This also implies, similarly, that the work of the small business person is never done, that it's hard work, that it's long work, that it involves long hours. I know that many people who have small businesses, perhaps you're one of them or know somebody who has a small business, oftentimes they will not be able to take vacations for years, or perhaps ever, that they have to work literally every day of the week for years and years and years, because any time that they give up on the small business, any time that they're away, they have to shut the business if they don't have anybody that they can trust to take it over. And they don't want to lose out on potential profits, or they don't want to annoy or turn off their regular customers by having the business closed. And this is one of the issues here that the Buddha seems to have understood. In the second sutta that we're going to be discussing, the Buddha compares three positive qualities of the successful business person, the successful shopkeeper, with three successful qualities of the successful, or I should say, three good qualities of the successful monastic. Now, one way to read this sutta is that there's a comparison going on here, and that the qualities of the monastic are seen to be superior to those of the shopkeeper, and that's, of course, well and good. That's true. That's one way to interpret this. But there's also, I think, another way to interpret it, which is that the Buddha is giving us some insight into what good qualities one should have to be a shopkeeper. And what are those? Well, the first one is that one should have a good eye. And what does this mean for the Buddha? The Buddha, he discusses this. What it means is that they have an understanding of the products that they sell in their shop. They have to have an understanding in particular of what you might term the retail and the wholesale price, the difference between how they can buy the product, at what price they can buy it, and alternately at what price they can sell it. And so therefore how much profit they can make with a given amount of stock. In other words, if they know that if they buy one sack of grain, that will imply a certain amount, X amount of profit that they can make. This is what it is to have a good eye, or another word to put it is to see clearly. As we understand, a shopkeeper is going to buy something in bulk at a low price, relatively low price, and then in order to make profit is going to sell smaller portions of that to their customers at a higher price per unit. And the difference here, again, is their profit. Now, the second good skill that the merchant has to have is to be, the Buddha says, responsible. What does it mean for the shopkeeper to be responsible? What that means is that they have to be good at negotiating and haggling. That is, that in order to have a successful shop, the shopkeeper has to be able to negotiate down the price that they're going to pay for their raw materials, let's say, the goods that they're going to sell. They're not going to be the sort of person who's going to necessarily accept the first offer that they're going to be given by their supplier. Instead, they're going to ask for a cheaper price. And similarly, when they go to sell the product, they're not going to sell it at the price that the customer would want right off, because otherwise they wouldn't make a profit. Instead, they have to be good at haggling with the customer as well. So they have to be responsible on both ends, we might say. Responsible with buying and responsible with selling. If they aren't, then they're not going to have a viable business, and they're going to go out of business and not going to make a profit. The third beneficial quality of the shopkeeper is that they have to, the Buddha says, have supporters. Now, what does that mean? Well, that's rather a complex kind of good beneficial quality. And so I think in this case, let's read what the Buddha has to say about that. What he says is, to have supporters is when rich, affluent, and wealthy householders or householders' children know of him, this good shopkeeper keeps an eye out and is responsible. They're capable of providing for their wives and children and paying us back from time to time. They deposit money with the shopkeeper, saying, "With this, friend shopkeeper, earn money to raise your wives and children, and pay us back from time to time." Well, leaving aside the androcentric focus of this particular passage, I mean, again, ancient India was male-dominated, shall we say, so we're talking about men here as shopkeepers rather than women. But the point is general, I think, but what is the point? The point is that in order to be successful, the shopkeeper has to have the eye of the wealthy people in their community who are going to front the money in order to be able to support the business. Now, why is that the case? In order to open a shop, in order to have a shop, it requires of the shopkeeper that they already have enough funds, enough capital to be able to buy the raw material that they're going to sell. So before they open up their storefront, they have to have stock that they can put in it. Otherwise, they have no business. So how are they going to get the money to buy, let's say, the raw materials that they're going to put in their shop the first day? Well, they need this, again, the support from the wealth in the community who are going to lend them money. The people are going to lend them the money, then they're going to be able to buy the raw materials that they put in the shop, sell those materials over a period of time, make a profit, and then pay back their lenders, that is, the wealthy people in their community. And we can expect that for the wealthy to be interested in this whole thing, they're going to want some return on their investment. That is to say, they're going to have to probably be paid back a little more than they had invested in the business. Now, all of this is really quite sophisticated. It's all implied, I think, in what the Buddha says, and it's maybe one of the earliest descriptions of business investment that we find in ancient texts, from the 4th, 5th century before the Common Era, talking about the wealthy people supporting a small business person. Now, these three beneficial qualities of the shopkeeper are then, as I say, compared to three similar beneficial qualities of the well-practicing monastic. The well-practicing monastic has to have a good eye or see clearly. What do they have to see clearly? They have to see clearly the Four Noble Truths. Or we might say they have to see clearly suffering. They have to see clearly the cause of suffering in craving. They have to see clearly the end of suffering in nirvana. And they have to see clearly the path to the end of suffering, which is the Eightfold Path. Also, they have to be responsible. And just the way the shopkeeper is responsible by being willing to haggle and being good at haggling with people and negotiating, the monastic has to be responsible in putting forth right effort. That is, putting forth an effort to nourish their beneficial qualities, their skillful qualities, and working to denourish their unskillful qualities. And third, the monastic has to have supporters. And what does this mean? Well, what this means is that the monastic has to know of more advanced or knowledgeable, skillful monastics within their community to whom they can go for advice and instruction, and they can look to dispel their doubts. Without such leadership in the monastic sangha, a young monastic is going to have a difficult time. And then the Buddha says that if the monastics have these three skillful qualities, they will with them be able to acquire many more abundant skillful qualities over time in much the same way that the shopkeeper with the same skillful or at least similar skillful qualities is able to gain great wealth over time. Now, all of this discussion that I've gone through here may raise the question in your mind about the Buddha's attitude towards wealth generally. As I say, I have a course that sort of goes into that, but quite a while back I made a video comparing the Buddha's attitude to wealth with that we find in the New Testament with Jesus Christ. And many of us will understand Jesus had a very negative attitude towards wealth. It's something that actually tends to be forgotten nowadays. And this video of mine has been somewhat controversial among some people. The Christians think I'm being a Buddhist, and the Buddhists think I'm being a Christian, so I guess I've got to be doing something right. Anyway, I'll leave a link to that up on the screen if you want to see more. If you're getting something out of these videos, please take a look at my Patreon page. It's linked down below where you can help support the channel. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you on the next video. And meanwhile, all of you, be well.